Rise and shine, everyone! Another day, another new learning. Welcome to the another video discussion under the course L19 Children and Adolescent Literature. In this video, we will be tackling one of the most crucial part in the field of selecting literary pieces for children and adolescents. So, stay tuned for today's discussion. Activate your senses as we dive into learning what to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. Introducing the reporters from BSAD English 2A. Yours truly, Rubel Sam Tindugan, together with my co-member, Nina Angela Huwab. We will give you a comprehensive discussion about the 8 concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. But before that, let us dive into the introduction of this particular lesson. Poetry is often the first literature presented to a child in the form of nursery rhymes or lullabies. Offering lyrical appeal and short, direct themes, these kinds of poetic verse are viewed by some as transitional works which prepare developing minds for longer forms of literature. Yet, it is a field under critical pressure as poets, scholars, and parents regularly debate the defining characteristics of children's poetry. So, later on, as you watch this video, you will be able to know those crucial concepts and characteristics we should always remember on what to choose when selecting children literary pieces. The 8 concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. So these are the 8 concepts we should always remember in choosing poetry for the youngsters. To start with, let us have the first concept. The first concept, poems that are lively with exciting meters and rhythms are most likely to appeal to young children and adolescents. Meter is an important factor in selecting poetry among children and adolescents because it helps the readers understand rhythm as it relates to words and lines in a poem. Poems that have lively and exciting meters allows the readers change the mood which are most likely appealing to the children and adolescents. So imagine a poetry with just only one paragraph and is similar to a news article. Probably kids might see it as boring, right? So that is why meter is a necessary element we should always look for in selecting poetry. Meter contains exciting rhythms that would catch the attention of the readers, especially the young ones. So let us proceed to the second concept. Poems for young children and adolescents should emphasize the sounds of language and encourage wordplay. The words in the poems play with the sounds of language. Similes and metaphors are appropriate for children to understand and appreciate. This would expand their vocabulary and teaches an appreciation for language. So we all know that literature consists of this primary component, the language. Using of language as a mean of communication is a vital innate ability a human have acquired and should be developed. Through literature, we need to choose a poetry that utilizes the sounds of language, particularly the figures of speech like alliteration, onomatopoeia, assonance, and many more. This could be a factor that would widen the reader's ability to understand a book in such a non-complex manner. The third concept. Sharply cut visual images and fresh, noble uses of words allow children and adolescents to expand their imaginations and see or hear the world in a new way. Imagery in poetry creates similar snapshots in a reader's mind. Using visual images can draw readers into a sensory experience. Images will often provide young children and teenagers with mental snapshots that appeal to our senses of sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Word choice, on the other hand, helps the readers unlock images and emotions, allowing them to digest the story effectively. So, Brilliant images and vibrant illustrations are great concepts we should always consider. This could attract the children and adolescents' attention since it allows them to visualize what was the story is all about. It should also incorporate good word choice for a comprehensive understanding. The fourth concept. Poems should tell simple stories and introduce stirring scenes of action. Simple stories are more accessible to more categories of readers, especially young children and adolescents. This would provide a more concise format than full-length novels. In addition, simple stories should stir action scenes that has a substance, helping to win an audience's intellectual and emotional investment. As a good start for children, choosing a poetry with uncomplicated stories helps them digest the information even more better. These uncomplicated stories shouldn't just rely on a dull setting, characters, and themes. It should be thrilling in a sense that readers would incorporate themselves into a particular scene of the story where they can feel that the scene is realistic. This would help them engage their emotions and make their own judgments reflecting on the story.
This is the number 5 concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. The poems selected should not have been written down to children's supposed level. The poems should not patronize children. In choosing poetry, the message of the poem is the most crucial part in selecting poetry. It could be something as simple as your love of cupcakes, or it could be something more complex like a relationship. Whatever it is, the message should be clear without stating the obvious or patronizing the children and adolescents. When you select a poem, you should pick and understand the meaning on it. Even though it is a simple message, but it is understandable. It should be clear, and the message of the poem is very important because children has a sense to create an imagination. Number 6 concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. The most effective poems allow children and adolescents to interpret, to feel, and to put themselves into the poems. They encourage children to expand comparisons, images, and findings. Poems that creates images of sight, touch, smell, and taste to help children in making comparisons to what they understand and know, and to help them stretch their verbal and mental images. Children prefer contents they can relate to based on their own experiences. The poems was very interesting. When you create an images, the children comprehend their attention to the story you tell. The children understand and easily catch up the story when they feel and see the image of what the story look like. This is the number 7 concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. The subjects should delight children and adolescents. They say something to them, enhance their egos, strike happy recollections, tickle their funny bones, or encourage them to explore. Children and adolescents prefer rhyme and humorous poetry that are not complex and content based on familiar experiences. Enthusiasms declines as children get older, favor contemporary over traditional. A poetry should encourage a creative way of exploring other cultures. Try to ask something to the child based on their experiences. Say something to the story and expand the story and makes it similar to their experiences. Make fun and enhance their ego. Make a jokes to catch their attention and the listener will not bored. The 8th and the last concepts to consider when selecting poetry for children and adolescents. Poems should be good enough. They stand up under repeated readings. Poems should be good enough to stand up under repeated readings. This fluent reading enables children and adolescents to spend less time on decoding and have greater comprehension of the text. The poems should be repeated readings because there are child or adolescents who's not easily catch the story of the poem. Your claim is to become the child and adolescent a fluent readers, so it is better to read again and understand the story. The comprehension in writing of the children and adolescents will improve more.
According to Glaser and Williams, they further claim that poetry should be judged as literature on its own merit, and children should be given the most appropriate literature. So, based on this statement, it is indeed important that we should give the children and adolescents the most appropriate literature for them to read. This could help them appreciate even more how phenomenal literature is. So take note that we aspiring educators should remember these concepts when we choose poetry for the young ones as we conquer our future endeavors as a teacher. So that was it. We hope that you've learned something in this particular lesson, and once again, this is Rubal Samtindugan with Ninia Angela Huwab, the reporters for this finals discussion. Thank you for your time spending with us, and have a great day ahead.